Welcome to Who Made That, the podcast about people who make the games that we love. Andre and I are both industry veterans. We spend a lot of time talking to each other about games, talking to other industry people, and when we talk about what's blowing up on Steam or what's coming out soon, the inevitable question is always, who made that? The game industry is international, but it's also weirdly a small community. And as people who are a part of it, we always like to learn more about the artists and the business people behind our industry. So to that end, for our very first recording of Who Made That, our guest today is Tom Eastman, the president at Trinket Studios. And he's going to talk to us today about their newest game, Battlesuit Aces. So welcome, Tom.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Tom, it would be awesome if we could get some background on you and on Trinket, and just the path that kind of led you here before Battlesuit Aces,
absolutely.
I guess.
If I might interrupt for just a sec. I guess that's going to be my role to interrupt. Anytime somebody, do you guys have this, that anytime somebody says you're a veteran of the industry, in my mind, it's like somebody who came to Warzone, got injured as, I don't think we can discuss if we can swear. I guess we can. So he came back injured as fuck with PTSD, maybe with, if you're lucky, with all the legs and then
yeah, we have a crutch now.
Yeah, I don't want to be that. I want to be like, just a kind of a guy from the games.
Okay,
so
we're games industry titans.
Battle worn.
Yes.
We actually just recently we were asked to do a talk for at DePaul University in Chicago. Their game innovation center was like, hey, you guys should come do a talk, and they asked us to provide a company bio, and we for the first time edited our description to switch from a trio of industry professionals to say industry veterans. We're battle hardened enough. We've survived long enough. Let's do it. And that cracked me up that we finally felt qualified or something. Yeah.
Qualified. Yeah. Actually, before you intro your background, let's do some fun stuff, because Andre and I also wanted to just warm up with a quick convo of what everybody has been playing recently, related to work or not. So I'm just curious, what have you been playing in your free time, Tom?
I am an absolute terrible guest for that question because I have 3 kids now. One is one.
Oh, me too.
And as you know, there's not as much free time as there maybe used to be. So most of the time when I'm playing a game, it's a in development game from developer friends. And I find that to be the most fun and rewarding because there's direct social interaction based on a small demo or a shorter version of a game. So I can't really talk about any of those, but that's usually, it's bite-sized things played at night while everyone else is asleep for an hour, and then having a chat with someone about how they should change their game. And it's really fun, but not very exciting. I used to play a lot of Halo, was my big main game, and all the Blizzard games up until World of Warcraft. So I'm out of the gaming world. I just watch people play games now while I do the dishes.
Yeah, I also have 3 kids. I know that feeling very well. Andre, what about you?
Actually, I guess for the same reason. I don't have kids, but the last couple of months of 2025 were really, really heavy. We announced a couple of games, and then we've produced one game. So for that reason, I picked up Dispatch just before Christmas because I thought, and this is how it was, playing one episode is sort of bite-sized. Take me 25-30 minutes to finish. So I think on my last episode that I had to finish because I stopped after the break. Loved it. I think I saw quite a few games that try to go into superhero direction without actually having superheroes, like non-Marvel, none of the DC stuff. And I felt like that's a big risk, because people don't care about superheroes they don't know, that haven't had exposure for many, many hours before. So this is why Marvel started the universe by showing each separate hero before they started the Avengers team. And because at this patch, they show the sort of the real side of these characters, like their daily lives. I think it worked out for them really well, which I was really surprised about. I guess, yeah, interesting combo of making story-driven, like choices matter game with superheroes that new. Yeah, so I liked
that's
it a lot.
super impressive. I also just thought of a game that I played recently and can talk about from a developer friend. The 3D platformer Big Hops just came out, and that was from an ex-Chicago developer, Chris Wade and his company, and that is like one of those games where some developer is like, I'm going to make a Nintendo game except as good as Nintendo or better, and it's all about 3D platforming where you can control more of the world. So you can get these veggies, fruits and nuts that like acorns that grow vines that you can climb up, or sort of tools that build rails that you can grind on. And it's a much more like sort of immersive sim version of Mario Odyssey. And I think that is probably going to do very well because he did a great job.
Oh, I know. I remember this game. It's been developed forever. Unless
it had a
maybe
complex history with Annapurna publishing it, and then when they had their drama, he like escaped, and so now it's self-published. So he had a big adventure.
I think it was back. Yes, nice. I do remember it. It was probably so long in development that I think I remember it from my time at Tiny Build. We looked at it and were amazed by the developer, but at the time did not think it's something that we liked. Another game that came to mind, because when I was telling about the superheroes without being like known superheroes, another game that came to mind is Capes. I think it's by Australian developer, which I think I also looked at the pitch really early on, and then it was picked up by iterated.
Nice.
Released in 2024. Didn't do super well. Haven't played so yet. Even though I'm really into this tactical stuff, I need to maybe try it.
That actually looks really cool.
Yeah, but for that game, I think
familiar.
I felt like that was a little bit of a problem, that there's no exposition of these superheroes. At least at the time, it didn't feel like there would be a place for that exposition, and you got to play them as your like guys on a team, and I don't know, felt like a little bit of a disconnect.
Mm-hmm. So on my end, let's see. I pulled up Steam so that I could look at what I've been doing. It's funny. We started a publishing company to make the games that we love playing, but because I have 3 kids and then spend all of my time working on these games, the actual games that I spend my time playing now are often like not the ones that I would have thought from years ago. But I have been playing a lot of Risk of Rain 2, which is kind of an evergreen one for me. I've been playing it since it was in early access, or when it first came out. I don't remember exactly if it did that. They have relatively new DLC, so that's been cool. I still play a lot of that, and Risk of Rain Returns. And then in the winter sale on Steam, I bought The Last Caretaker, which is a job simmy game about a robot driving around on a boat. But it's really cool. Everything, you have like fuel and stuff, but a lot of what you do is manage electricity. Like, you're producing wattage from solar panels, and then everything on your ship requires a certain amount of, kilowatt hours. And so you have to kind of balance all of that stuff. And it's a little janky, but it's pretty awesome. Really interesting game. And then the last one I'm almost done with is a game called Lorne's Lure, which is a platformer. There's got to be a genre name for this that I just don't know. It's one of these like kind of first-person platformers where you're climbing on stuff, and there's been like a rise of these recently. And in Lorne's Lure, you're like inside a megastructure. This like absolutely massive. The levels are all massive and sort of seem impossible until you get into them, and suddenly there's like paths everywhere. It's really interesting, very fun, and was a solo dev in Unity. It's done really well, and I think he's doing more levels now, which is cool.
Looks amazing.
It's quite fun, yeah.
Is it Dark Souls like, Z? No, because there are no enemies, but the atmosphere.
It's very heavy on atmosphere, and the storytelling it does remind me of that. It's like you run into an NPC in the middle of nowhere who has some sad tale about like what happened here or how they ended up there, you know, and then you move on. You don't even have to talk to any of them technically. Like the whole game is just traversal, like get from here to there.
Yep. This is why.
So the lore is optional, but it's really fun to find it.
Yeah, like again, there's no enemies, so I find it strange that the first thing that I thought about is Dark Souls, and I realized now this is the parts of Dark Souls where you want to get to a certain ledge and you just continue. I can't get there. Yes, it's possible. I just need to like a little bit of a different jump, and so yeah. Oh, I also played I started playing the Altars, which was...
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, which was on my list for a long time, and I never started it. And then I saw one of my friends' top 2025 games list. That was, I think I mentioned to you, Tucker, it was Favzi's list that I read, and he put it on top as his first game. And I'm like, wait a second, I don't think I've ever seen anybody say that was their goatee. And I'm like, I want to try that. I loved it so far, but I just started like maybe on these sank like 3-4 hours.
That one is internal 11-bit, right? It's not a published title?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. This is, I guess, the same team that's this War of Mine. And I don't know, Frostpunk. I don't know how many. I understand. I don't know a lot about how 11-bit Studios is structured. Maybe I should read about it.
It's a beautiful looking game.
Yeah.
One that Tom and I will just look on wishfully, not having the time to actually play.
Well, I think I find it interesting. Sometimes there's games that you start playing, you spend with them like 3-4 hours. You feel like you cannot spend more, or just like you wanted to spend more, but you couldn't for some reason. But at least you know how it was set up, what was the core mechanics, how obviously there's a lot of games that you sort of feel them and understand them much better after sinking like 20, 50, 100 hours. But for what it is, I think I already got to the point where you basically make your clone and with different abilities. And they spend a lot of time making me fine psychologically with the fact that I'm going to work with my own clone. And they invest a lot of like exposition time into that. And I'm really looking forward to see how it's going to feel from the story point of view, where there's going to be like 50 of me running on the base.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, cool. Well, a good overview of the games we are playing and aren't playing. Let's jump back into to you, Tom, and to get to Battlesuit Aces. But yeah, it would be great if you could just run us through a little bit of your background. I've mentioned Andre to you, but Tom and I know each other from a previous game that was published by Adult Swim. So he and I go back to probably like 2014 or something like that.
Yeah. I'll try to give you the fast version of this, because now that I'm an industry veteran, it's very long. And you can tell me if you want to dig into any certain points. So like I mentioned, I was big into Halo growing up, and because of that, I guess even before that, I knew that I wanted to be a game developer. That was just like the three things at some point someone asked me, and I was like, yeah, these are the three options that are real for me. It was astronaut, Major League Soccer player, and game developer. And it turned out one of those was more realistic than the others, as unrealistic as all three felt at the time. And played a lot of Halo. That was like the game for my friend group in high school every Friday or Saturday. So I knew everything about Bungie as a developer. And so I knew when Alex Seropian, one of the founders of Bungie, who's from Chicago, left Microsoft after Halo 1, and that acquisition came back to Chicago and formed Wideload, which at the time, when I graduated college, I interned there, and before that I interned at Garage Games, the makers of the Torque game engine, which was Unity before Unity.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that.
So ended up interning at Wideload. It seemed like the perfect company. It was sort of like a 30-person indie team, but somewhere they had money, so it felt like a funded indie. I really loved Stubbs the Zombie, which was made with the Halo 1 engine, so I was like all about like this team. I want to learn from this team, and then I want to be there 6 years, and then I want to start my own company. That was always the goal. I'm gonna like find the cool people here and start a company. A month after I started full time, so I graduated college, started there, was there a month. They're like, hey, we just got acquired by Disney. And that adjusted those plans. I didn't want to spend 6 years there, especially after we made prototype after prototype. Eventually, they were like, you're going to make an Infinity Blade clone using Marvel characters. And at that point, there was a big clear split when they announced that. They were like, we're going to make Marvel games, like Marvel iterations of the same game for like many years. Start with the Hulk, then do Captain America, then do Iron Man, whatever. The people over 30 were like, yay, stability. The people under 30 were like, I hate this. I came here to like be creative, and that was the reason that Wideload seemed like such a wonderful place. All their games were very different from each other. So after 3 years, I stole or left. A lot of people left around this time, and you could tell because they would go to Disney World first before they quit, because we had like passes and all that from Disney. You could always
hilarious.
Tell. That's like when the tech directors were leaving, you'd know, because they would go to Disney first, use up their free passes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I left with two of the people I worked with the most and the best at Wideload. Ben Perez, who was the other programmer. I sort of split a lot of our development of all the different prototypes, and then the final like Disney's Avengers Initiative Hulk was a made in Unity mobile game. Ben and I sort of split all the tech side of that. I guess I'm a programmer by trade. I did computer science in college, all with the goal of being game developer, made games through college, yada, yada. And then Eric Huang, who is just an incredible character artist. That's what he was brought on to sort of do Disney, Pixar style character concepts and illustrations. But he had spent his college years doing 3D on top of that, because he had already basically mastered 2D. And so the three of us, we were all sort of disillusioned by making Marvel games all the time. Eric and I at this time were also roommates, so we were sort of like talking about games, complaining about how Disney was mismanaging the studio. So it wasn't a hard pitch to be like, let's leave. None of us had significant relationships or children or anything, and we had some amount of savings from Disney. So and we had just made a mobile game in Unity, which seemed like the easiest way. We're like, let's make some mobile games quickly. Let's spend a year trying to start a company. And if we succeed, then that's cool. If we don't, I'm sure we can find other jobs. So we prototyped 3 mobile games really fast. The first one was Color Sheep, which is a like fast-paced arcade game where you're matching colors on the phone to shoot a giant colored laser out of a sheep's mouth to kill different colored wolves. Very arcadey, 2-month project. That one did reasonably well. And at least for us at the time, it made over $100,000 as a 99-cent game. And then our next one.
What year would this have been?
2013.
Okay.
And sort of interleaved with that, we made a puzzle game called Orion's Forge. Turns out that, I mean, puzzle games are painful, but our competitors would be like, "Where's my water?" which would have like thousands of levels, and we were like, "Yeah, we'll have like little story fables as you build constellations," and we're like, "We have 40 puzzles." That one did not get the featuring that we wanted or have the legs to continue. But Color Sheep, being like an endlessly replayable arcade game, all about mastering mixing of colors, did way better. Then there was a third game, Accidents, which was about being a little kid pushing with superpowers, saving like a disastrous diorama from hurting people. There'd be like a grandma crossing the street, she'd get hit by a car. There'd be like someone walking under a piano would fall on them. It was very like cartoon shenanigans. That one, it was an accident. The game design was just never there. But the goal with these was like each one of us will try being the director of a game. We'll try different genres. We'll learn how to work together. That was super important because for the puzzle game Orion's Forge, I tried writing the script and it was really bad, and it was really clear that Eric is good at this. So making 3 small like 2-month projects really helped us there. Then after that, we were like, let's make something a little bigger. That turned into Battle Chef Brigade, which ended up being way bigger than we wanted. That ended up being more like 4 years. But the concept was strong enough of fantasy Iron Chef or fantasy cooking competition, where the orcs and elves and humans chefs hunt monsters in the arena, bring those ingredients back to the kitchen, make dishes for the judges. Like that was like such a beautiful, clear pitch. And we let the game just keep building. We did a Kickstarter. We signed with Adult Swim Games, as Tucker mentioned. And everything went relatively smoothly. It was one of the early games on the Switch, which really, really helped. Or presumably was a huge factor in its success. It did twice as well on Switch than Steam. Probably like it was a good genre fit, good like style, like genre controls fit for the Switch. So everything worked out really well there. Eventually, Adult Swim Games started collapsing. Yeah,
Imploding.
Tucker probably has all the good verbs for that one. So the things that we had planned to continue on it, we were like, we're not doing this anymore if none of the people we like are there anymore. And we started brainstorming, let's go from fantasy to sci-fi. And instead of doing a zillion hand-drawn animations, let's do a card game where it's just one illustration per card. And then we built a pitch deck. I'm skipping over the pandemic where we worked on a PvP card battler mobile game within another indie company. It was like 2 years. It was supposed to be 2 months of like contract work. It was a fun project. Got to work on a like 30-person fully remote team. And that helped us have enough money to then make a really solid prototype and pitch for what became Battlesuit Aces, but at the time was called Mech Trek because we watched a lot of Star Trek during the pandemic. Then we went through the whole pitch process. Well, we could talk a lot more about that, but eventually signed with Outersloth, the patrons of the art from Innersloth, Forest, and Victoria, the Among Us money, basically. They're funding games to be for self-publishing. And luckily, Forrest was a Kickstarter backer of Battleship Brigade, so he had some level of trust in our ability to make games or communicate or something. And Victoria, I had met at KitFox, which had been making Moon Hunters at the same time as our Battleship Brigade Kickstarter, so we'd done lots of Kickstarter like cross promo. And I had given a key to Battleship Brigade to Victoria and met all of them in person when we were up in New England for a wedding. And so we had visited Montreal. So there was like a very like luck connection there that couldn't have worked out better. And then Battleship Brigade shipped in October of 2025. And we're still adding to it, working on it, while also figuring out what's next.
So it sounds like I didn't realize now, even though I looked at your LinkedIn and sort of researched, I did not. I looked mostly at Steam. I missed the part where you guys started in mobile. which actually for me, that was also the case, how I went from, developing games for consoles and working as a developer, but then at some point realizing that I want to start my own studio. And then mobile was back then, from about when App Store started becoming a thing, till about 2015. It was a time where a lot of developers jumped onto this opportunity, because that was like Steam was still not there yet in full, but mobile was easy. Just get a phone, make a game, sell it. There's no...
And 99 cents was still viable.
Exactly, model back then, before they introduced free-to-play. But my reason to finally close this sort of the chapter with mobile and go into PC and console stuff was that I really was sort of disillusioned by mobile, that it is really difficult to make games that I like as games, and them mobile becoming more of a Skinner box and, really free-to-play driven and really a different business. I wonder, was that the same rationale for you, or was it... I'm really curious on how, because the reason I'm curious about this is because we see another wave of this happening with mobile now becoming sort of not being in the best state, at least stagnating at best, and we see a lot of developers now go from mobile to PC and console for the same reasons, and I'm sort of renaissance of the same happening.
Yeah, I think all of that was true for us. We often joke that we make games in genres we don't like, and there's some nuance to that. And the big thing is that we're two programmers and an artist, and so none of us are designer trained or really designer focused. And we'll learn that along the way. But none of us really liked mobile games then or now, in particular, compared to console PC games. But we felt like it was like an accessible market where small games are welcome or were welcome. And so that it was sort of like, we want to make small games to get our feet under us and start figuring out how to do this together. And mobile seemed like the easy way. We just made a mobile game with Wide Load Disney. But it was never our intention to do that for long. It was sort of like, let's do this as the platform where small games are plausible. And we definitely see that happening again. Like Battleship Brigade, we wanted to bring it to mobile, but as part of the Adult Swim Games collapse, but also just we're like, well, we built all of this stuff. It'd be reasonable to bring it to mobile. And it was like, this interface is just too difficult to make work. Let's not do it. And now we're seeing more. For Battlesuit Aces, it was clear, we should just make sure this is multi-platform from the beginning. A touch interface won't be impossible, especially because of the Switch. But we're like, let's make sure that what we're pitching is multi-platform, so that we can pitch Apple Arcade and Netflix. And even then, it felt like, okay, yeah, this isn't going anywhere, because once you start talking to someone and they're like, hey, do a soft launch in Australia, New Zealand, and then see and whenever they start using as many acronyms as possible in a sentence, we're like, okay, I don't want to find out the genre average, monthly active users.
LTV, CPS, whatever. I even don't remember them anymore.
And we're like, okay, this just sounds terrible. And each of them, we have some friends who've gotten deals with each of those, and it was clear their platform strategy just changes all the time, and it doesn't feel like there's a consistent vision. And so it was clear that okay, mobile is not going to be our primary platform. Mobile is an opportunity that we'll figure out later, that I can't go into more detail about right now. But it is I think that paid off in the end, making a multi-platform. Designing for multi-platform or multi-input types was important. Obviously, we had to do PC and console from the start. We shipped Battlesuit Aces, or launched on PlayStation 5, Switch, and Steam. And obviously, Steam alone, you kind of have to do. You don't have to do mouse and keyboard, but you probably should for a card game. Most card games support multiple types of input because it's not too bad. So we felt like that was a good goal from the start. But leading with mobile just seems like a nightmare.
Yeah.
I think it's also impossible for a small team to be self-publishing on Steam is a huge effort by itself. And the things you do for Steam are not going to help you on mobile, and vice versa. It's a really, even with consoles, it's a different thing. But at least between PC and consoles, there are a lot of audience that overlaps, and there's stuff that is helpful on both. But yeah, with mobile, it's just, I think it's unless you're a bigger team of 25, 30 to 50 people, then you can have a couple of people just focusing on a different niche and ensuring you're good there. I think otherwise it's just,
What did we do, Tom, for Battle Chef Brigade? Did you guys do the ports, or did Adult Swim outsource?
We did everything
for console?
And that's just like one of the lessons that we figured out over time was play to your strengths. As two programmers and an artist, we're able to.
That makes sense. Yeah,
we will do multi-platform whenever it makes sense. For better or for worse.
Pretty incredible though for a 3-person team to support multi-platform launch day one, like you did with Battlesuit Aces.
Yeah, it was an undertaking. It was like in the top 10 most painful things, but not in the top 5. Like I think there's like dealing with the platform backends, as you know, is a nightmare and not fun.
Yeah.
But it's straightforward. Like there's a problem and you solve it, even if you have to email Nintendo or Sony 100 times, whereas the complexities of marketing or managing like an enormous voice cast or scheduling voice sessions, like all of those things can get way more complicated, or just like design decisions. Those have like way more unknowns and you got to make complicated decisions. Platforms, it was sort of something like the programmers can do it on the back burner. We're just going to assume that it's going to happen, and you don't have to have a lot of meetings about what to do or how to do it. You just do the checklists that are way too long and have things popping up all the time and figuring out what regions need what and all that. It's painful, but it's understandable.
Yeah, I get that. Well, actually, it's funny that you mentioned VO because that was definitely one of the things we wanted to talk to you about. We're gonna get into the game itself in a little bit, but before we do, I had 2 other questions I wanted to ask about your background. So I was just you mentioned earlier, it sounded like you guys made a intentional decision when you started doing those mobile games that you would kind of rotate through the roles. That was like a conversation you had ahead of time?
Yep. Yeah, we were really like, there's 3 of us, let's make 3 games. Let's keep them small. Let's each direct one. It was like a good vision, and I think helpful for each of us to feel like, okay, we're not going to get steamrolled by someone who doesn't know what they're doing yet, but it was like very clear as we progressed, like who was good at each thing.
Yeah, but I think that's the point, right? Is that like after you've done 3 of those, then nobody is going to be like, when is my turn to do this thing that I'm bad at, right? No, that's a really smart, as somebody who, I have learned from success. I have learned a lot more from failure over the years. Like it's a very smart way to kind of like succeed and fail quickly and early, in the life of your studio, which I'm sure saves a lot of
definitely miss
later.
Making those small games where iteration and learning from those mistakes is really fast. It's really easy to fall into traps like we'll get into VO, where it's a success on one game and then you double down on it for the next game and then it's albatross.
So last thing about your background. When I noticed this because I was looking at your LinkedIn earlier. When I saw that you had worked on Torque, it activated like a late 90s, early 2000s memory that had been completely lost, which was this era. It was like, so I am not a developer. I did like many of us, came up through similar paths and then bounced off at one point. So for me, it was like I loved really approachable software like QBasic when I was a kid. And then when my friends who ultimately went on to become computer scientists were like diving into C++ and getting more serious, I was like, that's where I was bouncing off, because I think they really loved programming and I really loved making games. And back then there was a much wider gap. Like they didn't have the kinds of easy to use libraries for things for C++ that they do now. And it was like a different era of the internet. It was harder to find this stuff out. So anyway, tools like Torque were always really exciting to me because the sort of theoretical promise of them was amazing. And then there were a bunch of them from that era, and they never had wide adoption. But other than like, I know I've put my hands on it and used it, I don't really remember much about it. So tell me a little bit about that product and also like what, your time there was like.
So Torque was really the Tribes engine from Dynamics. And
Nice.
so it was one of the earlier sort of like game engines, all C++, where the server and client architecture is built in, so that like all Torque games are basically multiplayer. Whether or not the server and the client are the same application on your computer for a single player game was sort of besides the point. You still had to do some amount of like, it's a server. Somehow Dynamics didn't want to keep, or maybe Dynamics imploded. I don't remember what happened, but Garage Games was built out of a lot of those people, Jeff Tennell and Mark Fronmeyer, I think. I don't remember their names, but there were a bunch of like Dynamics people who started Garage Games. They're like, we're going to make games with this engine, Torque. It was like Torque 3D at the time, I think. And we're also going to like make it licensable as sort of like a pre-indie game engine that anyone can use. Democratizing the games industry. There was like I forget their tagline, but it was all about like domination through collaboration. Anyway, they had like great forums, and that's where I was like spending a lot of my formative years at the end of high school and beginning of college. Getting to like understand the games industry. They made the thing that really got me aware of them was the Xbox Live arcade era had this game Marble Blast Ultra, which I just absolutely loved. And it was just like a multiplayer marble game with a lot of great single player levels, and one of my friends and I were really into it and got on the leaderboards, and so we were aware that I think that's how I learned, like, it says Torque at the beginning of this game, let me go check that out. And I tried a whole bunch of different game engine-y kind of things, and that was the first one. I was like, okay, this is fairly like understandable. We get way more into like weird games I made in middle school and high school, but the key being that there was sort of a community, which would not too dissimilar from the Unity community in like the early 2000s, where it's like a whole bunch of people want to make games. The engine is like sort of okay, and everyone's building on it. So I was able to intern there. They had an amazing intern program where like they had a like 4-bedroom apartment or something that for the interns that was like 10-minute bike ride from their offices, and it was like a nicely structured internship program, and they would both make games and work on the engine. At the time they were making Torque Game Builder, which was like Torque 2D with more like Unity. It was maybe too simple compared to Unity, humorously. And they eventually got their lunch eaten by Unity, but they also they got bought eventually by a Barry Diller conglomerate to make Instant Action, which was one of the early like games in a browser things. And Wideload was making a game called Cyclomite for Instant Action, and that was another like connection I was able to make and maybe help me get that internship. Games in a browser never really took off, but there was a lot of overlap with what Unity was trying to do at the time, and so Torque very much felt. And I think this is like universally agreed upon, was like just before Unity and that the like everyone can make games process.
Yeah, they were just a little too early for like the
a
trend
bunch of
or
things.
whatever.
Yeah, if they had been there was a lot of people, if they had been making more mobile ready stuff, maybe it would have gone very differently for them.
Okay, well, let's talk about the game, about Battlesuit Aces. So, Andre, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember if I showed it to you, but Tom sent me the deck when you were pitching it. I went back and looked at it with the Mech Trek logo and everything. What was interesting, well, actually, maybe before we dive into that, if for anybody who hasn't played it, Tom, why don't you give like the short summary of what Battlesuit Aces is?
So this is where I am so disappointed in ourselves for releasing this game, because like I had that Battleship Brigade one-liner ready to go, fantasy cooking competition or fantasy Iron Chef, and then you add the next line and it makes it clear like, oh, there's hunting and cooking. We never felt comfortable with the Battlesuit Aces pitch, and we still change it on Steam regularly, but it's a story-rich deck builder is the basics. It's sort of a mecha anime, very narrative heavy, great deck builder card game. And like I was saying earlier about us making games that in genres we don't love, like Ben is a big roguelite deck builder player. I played a lot of Slay the Spire, but didn't get into like the whole rest of the genre. And then Eric hadn't played like any of those. We've played a lot of, some of us, I think Eric has played the most visual novel games, but we were very much like, we're just going to combine these two genres that none of us are like incredibly passionate about. They're not games that we grew up with. They didn't really exist. Both those genres have definitely increased in popularity over time. And so we never got good at that one-line pitch, but the closest is sort of like, it's a mecha anime story-rich or narrative deck builder. The closest things to it, there are a few, but the easiest is probably Thronebreaker, the Witcher card game RPG.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Spin-off.
Yeah, which I guess we could have taken as a sign because it did not do as well as they wanted, despite extremely high production values for a card game story RPG. But that's to say, gosh, I wish we had spent more time with that pitch deck and figured out that one-liner.
So that pitch deck was what, a year and a half or so before the game actually released, or at least a year, right?
Yeah, I think in the doc or in the pitch we were saying it was going to come out a year and a half after that, and ended up being closer to 2 years.
Okay. And how far into the project were you at the time you started pitching it?
I think for like core, like we're in pre-production. It was about 4 months of building a prototype and then 2 or so months of working on the deck. Wow. There's a lot of like, the pitch process started with like people like you, like people who like aren't probably not going to fund this, but are friends who will give us good advice. And then steadily we went to the scarier pitches, so that we were getting better and better at it. Particularly me being able to talk about it. Like, I'm sure back then I was more convincing about our one-liner.
Yeah, well, yeah, you maybe believe in it early on before you've had a chance to doubt yourself, right? And then you want to change it all the time. I noticed a lot had changed from the early pitch, but I also noticed that a lot had not. So I was just curious, like, creatively, where the concept came from and how you approached it from the art side, the story side, the design side. Like, were you diving into mechanics and card systems first, or were you thinking about these characters and the narrative you were trying to set up, like, or was it all happening kind
That's
of at the same time?
That's a great question. So I think it kind of happened in phases. The first was like a reaction to Battleship Brigade. The sort of like, oh man, all that hand animation. It was like 6 people in the animation pipeline for monsters and characters, like doing a run cycle for everything. That was not fun. So we're like, as I mentioned earlier, we're like, let's do cards. It's just a single illustration, and like we'll do it with a visual novel presentation. So like you don't need a whole bunch of animations. Look at Hades or Dream Daddy; they're doing such a good job with so little. So it was very much like there was a reaction to that. And then it was also, okay, we did a fantasy game, let's do a sci-fi game. What's something else that Eric wants to draw a lot of? And he had a lot of cool mech designs that he'd drawn growing up, and that was pretty straightforward. So we're like, okay, how do we make a card game? We still want characters. That's sort of Eric's specialty. We just made a lot of prototypes early on. The project, like internal name, is still Card Tactics. There was a while where you were playing cards on a hex grid, so it was sort of like Final Fantasy Tactics on a hex grid where you're playing cards. And then for a while, it was more like a Mega Man Battle Network. There was like 2 9x9 grids, and you're playing cards on mechs to shoot things. And then eventually, I think we were playing a lot of Slay the Spire, and we found issues with that. The Mega Man Battle Network one also had a lot of like Into the Breach references we were trying to figure out, and it never really felt right. It didn't feel like we were hitting the mech fantasy the way we wanted. Then we tried more of a Slay the Spire thing where you had a hand of weapons that you would play on either a single mech or multiple mechs. So you'd have all these different like weapons, like the rocket launcher, and they would link together. So the mechanic was like trying to optimize your energy usage and not overheat your mechs. That one, so each of these, looking back, we're incredibly frustrated with ourselves because each of them was like, oh, there was like a simple design decision, and it's very easy to be like, well, there are no design problems in the grass over there, so let's just go over there. And then you get there and you're like, oh, actually, the grass wasn't as green or fertile as we thought, or there's another design problem. Every game has design problems.
It's like everything is simple when you just conceptualizing it. Like it's going to be this and that together, especially when you're trying to play with other games mechanics. Oh, let's make it as Slay the Spire, but we just change this and that.
Breaks everything.
And then you put them together and realize it breaks so many things. You can even break the fundamental fun out of it. And you're like, well, I'm now with the broken stuff. So, well, like you said, it's over there. Let's go there. It's going to be all much better.
And the sort of forcing function is always, oh no, we're running out of money. And then you actually just make the decisions. You're like, well, we'll solve that later, or we'll solve it right now in this meeting, and we're going to be here till we're exhausted. And we will learn that someday, and like learn how to really dissect those decisions better. But that's like the core problem for most studios. So it's perhaps understandable, or it would be even easier if we had a designer. But eventually, we got to this game that was like, there are 2 mechs, 2 main characters, Heathcliff and Felix. They each have a set of weapons that are individually upgradable. Their mechs are upgradable. They had sort of talent trees. And it was fun. It was a very roguelike format, or like there wasn't a lot of motivation for why you're doing anything. We're like, yes, you can play this game. It's like reasonably fun. It just didn't feel like a Trinket game. We weren't excited about it. And the final like piece that got us excited and going fast again and ready to move towards production was realizing that we really wanted more characters in this game. And so that's when we switched the cards from being a whole bunch of weapons or verbs or like spells to being actual characters. And we're like, all the cards are going to be characters. They're going to be pilots in their mech suits. It's going to be all about characters. We're going to have a ton of characters. They're each going to be like a single illustration. That's so easy. And then we're going to have a narrative, and that's going to provide more of the motivation and structure to this game. And we are going to be on a ship, and a lot of things started clicking. Like, okay, the ship is going to be like the town in Battle Chef Brigade. There's going to be things you can do on your ship that are the pacing breaks. We're going to make it more episodic. Like I said, we've been watching a lot of Star Trek, but also we're just like, yeah, Eric's default style is kind of anime inspired, Western anime kind of thing. So let's make it feel a little bit like a show. Like we call them episodes, and we were afraid to pitch episodic in any pitch deck, but because that's loaded in bad releases, like spreading out your game over years for no reason. So we call them missions, but really we're thinking about like we want each episode to feel like a TV episode. You're going to sit down, you're going to play for 20 to 30 minutes. You're going to have narrative, you're going to have battles, and you're going to have some like a pacing break on your ship, and that's reasonably similar to Battleship Brigade. And I guess that's a pitch phase. Then there's the like, oh no, what did we actually promise, and how do we spend all this money? That gets complicated.
As an aside, I love, like, you can definitely feel the episode format every time the logo comes up and it's like Battlesuit Aces, you know? And I, after seeing it the first 3 times, perhaps paradoxically, I was like, they should do this on every load screen. Like between every segment, I want this logo to pop up and do the thing, because it feels like watching an anime TV show. It's like you're going to the ad break and boom, boom, boom.
That was an area where we kept talking about doing it. And for a while, like I think we should have leaned way more into that. For the beginning, the game, it had a branching narrative, but there was no map. The map was essentially like an episode select screen from like Netflix or Crunchyroll or something. And on the one hand, it felt really good from a like theming wrapper sense, but it didn't feel as much like an RPG as we wanted. So we brought the map back. I'm still kind of conflicted about, I mean, now in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, we should have done basically anything different there, but it would have been cool to lean more into like, this is an anime streaming service game within a platform, and leaned into that and shown the title card way more.
It's a fun element for sure.
Every time, Tucker, I think when we were discussing how we're going to talk, we also talked about this part. Every time Tucker says about this screen loading, he shows all the there's all the visuals.
I have to do it with my hands.
Yes, absolutely.
The worst thing about that is
sound effects.
We had planned to do that from the beginning, but we didn't actually do it until like 4 months before ship, when everyone was slammed.
Right.
And I made that animation to stub it in, and it shipped. And I'm hopeful that before one of the next updates, Eric will actually get his hands on it and we'll make it real.
Nice.
I was like, oh yeah, just do some things like
That's
this
amazing.
and it's good to go.
I mean, the games industry is nothing if not defined by compromise, right? It's like you do something and you're like, that's not great. We're going to fix that later, but at least the screen is there. And then you ship it because there's just no other. It's like at some point you have to make a call, right?
No, not as important. It's good enough. And leading up to launch, we have a Discord community, and I would make posts about like, will it ship every week? That was like, here's something that was like a sound effect from Battleship Brigade. Like we needed a whole bunch of sound effects for a demo. Our audio team was slammed by doing endless voiceover recording sessions, and we're like there are sound effects or little bits of art, or just acceptably programmer art versions of things. And yeah, you never know what's going to actually ship. You just try to make it either so bad that it can't ship or good enough that it can, and hope that you polish it later.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned VO. Did you know when you guys were starting, either during the pitch phase, or because that's important with the costs, or even before that when you were just setting up the project, that it's going to be all that VO? By the way, I think you've done an amazing job with that VO. I think this is what defines the characters for me, definitely. I did not think the VO matters for me that much until I tried playing the first version of Disco Elysium, and I couldn't play it. And then I picked it up again when Steam Deck was out, and I tried it again, and they added VO, and I realized this changes the game for me completely. Now it's one of my best games. So I think you've done an amazing job with VO. When did you know that it's going to be there?
So as I sort of alluded to
process?
earlier, Battleship Brigade, we had decided fairly early on that game was going to have voices. It seemed like a good way. Like if you're doing a character first game, if that was like one of your pillars, voiceover really helps. And that wasn't. I think our audio director at the time, he was trying to make the transition to games. He'd been doing games or audio stuff more for video, like corporate training videos and some games related stuff, but he was trying to get into games. And I think he did such a good job at recording so much VO on a short schedule that it gave us the illusion that it wasn't too painful. So right. Battleship Brigade it was like 96% voice. There were just the judges have a whole bunch of dynamic things to say about food, and there were like 12 judges, and the text, they can all say some of the same things, like, oh, this isn't spicy enough, that kind of thing. And we were like, oh, that's like, we don't want to record that for every single person. We'll just not voice that part. That was like the one part. And I was like, after that shift, we were like, why didn't we just do that? Like each of them could have recorded that. It would have been fine. So going into Battlesuit Aces, we're like, yeah, we're going to voice everything. We should have done that for Battleship Brigade. We're not going to screw that up. And we loved doing it. Like we really wanted to bring back those actors again. It was such like an enjoyable, fun thing. It just felt like, oh yeah, the characters of course need voices. We didn't properly plan for the size of the narrative of Battlesuit Aces. We cut the number of episodes in half at one point, but we should have cut it way more. The game would have been just as good if it was half the size it is. It sort of has 2 seasons in the single game right now. But there's a lot of anxiety that we haven't figured out how to solve, where first about having 2 genres, but also about the length of a game. Like a lot of our feedback on Battleship Brigade was like, oh, I wish this was longer. I want more. And we had that sort of started as Adult Swim Games was collapsing, and so we're like, yeah, this time we're not going to like make a game that's too short. Battleship Brigade was more like 6 to 8 hours, and we're like, yeah, we want to hit at least like 15. And it's really hard once your game gets to a certain size to know how long it really is, and to play it all frequently as like the like decision making team. Like you can't just be like, yeah, we're going to sit down and play 15 hours of some game. You can skip to certain parts, but eventually you're skipping through dialogue, and you don't have like an editor's mindset at that point. You just trust the narrative team. You're like, please just go do the right thing. We don't have time to review this. And they did an amazing job, but I wish early on we'd limited the scope more, because the scope of each episode, there's illustrations, there's card battles to design, and there's the VO to record. So there was like, let's do VO was decided before we decided how long the game was. Those were like 2 totally separate decisions in our mind, when they should have been very connected. And
as long as you sort of set it, one of the design pillars, that the dialogue is going to be, all dialogue is going to be voiced over. You sort of kind of get back from that. Now you have to, everything has to be. You cannot just, for this dialogue, there's not going to be VO. That's not how it works anymore. People sort of expect, and
and I think part of it, like we thought, like we hit our budget, so like it to some degree worked out. But also like Ben and I each had a kid during that phase, so there was a lot of stuff that was like, oh, we're not going to make that decision because we don't have time. There's too many other things to worry about. Hopefully we learn from that and make clear decisions, set up, like if we're going to do fully voiced, we got to make clear decisions about the downstream effects of any narrative decision that involves dialogue. It gets too risky at some point. And there's also like some fundamental principle about like, if something's small enough, you can iterate on it, you can fix it. Once it gets over some size, like there's not a lot of control over it. You just have to do it. And that feels like a very indie mentality when you're trying to hit a deadline. And we it doesn't feel, it just feels like we just got to overcome this. We can solve it. It's not like us assigning work out of like a production schedule. It's like, okay, we'll just do it. And eventually that sucks the fun out of doing that thing. And you're just overwhelmed. But the end result is the thing that we wanted. So it's hard to learn the lesson, I think, when you're worried about quality or game length. You just want to have all the things. And it's really hard to pick one to decimate.
Yeah. What was it? What aspect of it was the one that made it overbearing? Like, was it the sitting for the actual recording sessions, or like?
Yeah, so
Integrations.
the recording sessions are universally amazing and fun. Like voice actors are just really fun. They love learning about the characters. They love like finding that voice for a character. And a lot of the actors, we had 25 or 26 SAG-AFTRA union actors, and like they're so professional and good. And it's just a joy. Like each 4-hour session, like everyone has a great time. It's not fun when you have to do 2 4-hour sessions the same day, and it's also not fun if a lot of the dialogue is being written right as you lead up to a session. And that started, we had the most painful part of this was we realized that to hit our demo date, to hit our like deadline for shipping that we wanted, we needed to be recording, like have the script done and be recording at the same time. So we ended up splitting the entire game, basically every line, essentially split up the game into 3 sets of episodes. And then, so we're like, okay, we'll finalize these episodes first and record them as the next set is being finalized by the narrative team, as it's being written. And the trouble then is that if there's a character that is in both of those, or like certain lines of dialogue need to happen in the same session because some actor is doing 2 or 3 or 4 characters, we need to actually finalize some of those like later episodes, bits of them in this earlier one. And that was a total nightmare. We had a whole bunch of spreadsheets and tools to make sure that the script we were exporting for each session was exactly the dialogue that should be there. And so like if an actor should only need 1 session, they only got 1 session, and not like we'll do 2 hours for this phase and then 2 hours in a couple months for this phase. It was, the narrative team was amazing. Emmy Fausti and Lana Wynn were just phenomenal, but like that was a terrible thing to put on them. They like rose to the challenge and everything got written, but Ben and I had to do a lot of tooling to support script export, and then they would annotate the scripts, and we had a whole pipeline for managing all these scripts. That was basically didn't happen at all at Battleship Brigade because the whole script was done, then we voiced it. That was a lot simpler.
And there's time for you to, I guess, try it in a game, see if it actually fits. What's the interaction like? Basically, give it some time to polish, like readjust, and be happy with it. Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of that like time to marinate. It was like, okay, write it and record it, ready, go. Our lead writer, Megan, did everything on Battle Chef, but then also like shared writing with Eric on Battle Chef, and then the same thing for Battlesuit Aces. And they worked on a whole bunch of AAA games that they revealed had just as many or fewer lines than Battlesuit Aces. And
I'm sure.
They did an amazing job managing all of this. And like it wouldn't have gotten done without them. I wish that we had, realized the downstream effects of so much writing earlier. But one of the things they did that was amazing was add safety lines for all the actors, for all the characters, I should say. And so if there was time at the end of a session, because SAG-AFTRA rules like you do 4-hour sessions. You can't go over. You pay for 4 hours even if you don't use it. So we would make sure that if there was time, there were safety lines. So, and some of those were like, what if we want to make it so this character doesn't actually die because we're not sure if that's the right decision here? And Megan would have the safety lines written out for that. So that after recording.
So safety lines?
Yeah, safety lines. After recording, the story could be changed to accommodate that. And some of those were like each of the characters just having simple things so they could be in a scene, even if some other character who was recorded later completely changed the scene. So characters would be like, or like, I don't know about that, or like, sounds great. And so then there were times when like all the recording was done, except for like the final like captain session, because I think that was like 6 sessions. So a scene that we're like, oh, that's not working, or it needs to be shorter, or it needs to actually lead into a tutorial, those scenes could change. The characters in them could still stay the same, or like cut a character but someone's still there, and you sort of just like the narrative team just did an amazing job sort of like rebuilding a scene out of existing lines. So you could even like pull a scene out of a line out of safety and a line out of some other episode to change a scene in a different episode. And that is both like amazing and really shouldn't have been necessary.
So
that's a very responsible use of your time, though, to make sure you get everything you can out of the 4-hour session. I actually started my career doing a bunch of this for Cartoon Network because we recorded a bunch of VO for the MMO that I was working on, and they basically didn't have anybody else to do it, and so they gave it to the 22-year-old to run audio sessions. I had no experience, but it was really fun. But whenever we had extra time, we would just ask like voice actors to record voicemails, like for your phone. The guy who trained me had John DiMaggio, the voice of Bender, from Futurama, doing his answering machine.
But is that safety lines? Is this a widespread practice?
I have no idea. Megan just shows up and knows what to do and everything. So right. Probably, maybe.
Almost like a plan B kind of situation, right? For every dialogue, what if there's that? What if there's that? Just in case, let's that. So that's a lot of extra work, but then you end up with something cool. So I guess you guys, like you've done now like a lot of this, Tom, for 2 games. Tucker, I didn't know this part of you before, so apparently that is if we need someone like that doing the forklift, we can use your help. But is there like you end up with a huge like amount of audio that needs to be cut, worked on. I don't know if that's on your end or on the studio. Is they're doing this cutting and prepping and cleaning up, but then also the integration part, just going through the sheer volume of all that and knowing like just connecting everything between the episodes and all the dialogues and that. Is that something that's typically done in the engine? There's tools for that, or is that something custom? I have zero idea about how this is done. So
so Battleship Brigade, we made all of our tools in Unity. So all cutscenes, like dialogue and cutscenes, were all within this one tool where you're like, here's a line of dialogue, here's like a character's pose should change, trigger a sound effect. That was both good because all of this data was all together, and bad because it was not like writing a script. It was like, open this tool, find a specific conversation, and edit it. For Battlesuit Aces, we switched to Yarn, which is all text-based. It's designed for this purpose, and you can make custom commands for like trigger a sound effect here, but it looks closer to a script. It's like character name, thing they say. And it can be organized however you want. So we organize it by episode. So like the whole episode top to bottom exists there. It supports dynamic branching and variables and all the stuff that a game writer would expect is there. So that the downside of that is that there is sort of like you can't live edit it in the engine, which has downsides, right. But it's easier to write a lot of dialogue, which is what we ended up needing to do. It has some tools for like, there's basically a line ID for every single line, and that becomes sort of concrete once you press the button to set those on whatever episodes you finalize. So it's like a 7-digit like hash. For better or for worse, a Battle Chef Brigade, it was like take the first letter of each word in the line. And so you could sort of have a sense, you get used to seeing some lines their IDs because you knew what was being said in them. Whereas Battlesuit Aces, there's like gibberish. But each of those, there was some basic stuff from Yarn, but then there's a massive process of localizing where all that gets put into a spreadsheet and synced to some degree. But then, matching up the voice recordings was a nightmare. I think we ended up, at one point, there were 5 people helping get all the raw recordings cut up, cleaned up, selecting the right take, and then getting it named correctly. Some of that, in retrospect, we should have done a better job in the sessions. We should have been picking takes in the sessions. We should have been doing more complex stuff in a session. But the other, so we ended up just building a lot of tools where one of the key ones was sort of getting the exported version from the, like, trimming up all the pieces, all the individual takes, and then, but not naming them. They just be named like, I guess it was like character name, actor name, and then like 12 or like 203. And those are just all the pieces from that session. And then you're like, okay, what do I name this? And it's one of those 6-digit random hashes. And so what we did was, I wrote a tool that basically transcribes each of those lines. It transcribes the wave file. So you're like, okay, what was said in this dialogue, in this take? And then try to find, and then you'd say, here's the script that the actor used for that session. And you would try to find which line it seemed closest to. And sometimes that was like super straightforward. It was like, clearly this person is saying this thing. But sometimes if they're talking techno babble, the transcription has no idea, or some of the character names would be like, I don't know who that is at all. It wouldn't work, but it would give some best guesses. And sometimes that was enough to be like, okay, that's this line, go to the next one, auto rename it. I was shocked that there isn't a tool that just does that. Apparently, in a lot of AAA studios, this is just multiple people's job. The entire project is matching up lines to dialogue, picking.
Or maybe some internal tool that they would develop like 10 years ago and 15, 20 years ago. And
those people are doing that
just for their needs.
Like the 4 years of a project, and VO is always being recorded. But in the end, it was a ton of manual labor and tools to try to simplify it. And that
you need to also test this.
And then a lot of testing.
Just to ensure
the
that
testing,
all the VIO
a lot of
lines.
tooling on that end too. Like, are we missing a recording for any of these lines? And then, we would also have a transcription thing to try to verify. It would say, like, in the game, this wave file, it sounds like it says this. It's incredibly far from what I expect from the script. And that found 50 to 100 of those. But we would export a report basically, and the audio team could just, or the narrative team would both like review the ones that seemed really far apart. And usually it was a case where the take either was shorter or longer. Like someone would actually trim out 2 takes, or they would cut it out a sentence, but the script really had 2 sentences in it. So that helped narrow it down a little bit, because it was 21,000 lines. So you just hope that you get most of them right.
21,000 lines. 21,000 lines. My God. And when you say the tool, that would you compare the transcript to whatever is said in the audio, it would actually listen to the audio, try to try to take the words out of that and compare to. So it's not okay. So it's actually going into audio, which
It was very slow.
Yeah, that's
but at least those transcription software has gotten a lot better over the years.
Right.
So like those weren't too bad. I initially tried to do it with the built-in it's like Windows, essentially Cortana transcription for giving like smart home commands, like turn on the lights, and it has like a grammar you could set up, and it was really fast but horrifically inaccurate. So that didn't work at all.
Right. And I guess for the same reason. Oh, sorry, Taka,
go ahead.
I guess you also, not only just VO, you have a lot of text, a lot of dialogue. I noticed that the game is translated to Japanese and simplified Chinese, and you decided to go just for these because basically for the economic purposes, I assume, because VO its own thing that would be, I think, impossible to do in different languages, but even the text, that's a lot of huge expense, and I guess that's why you've chosen for like two languages where you need non-English the most.
Yeah, like simplified Chinese was the clearest choice for Steam. Like Battleship Brigade, I think Chinese is the second clearest language based on sales, and then wish list for Battlesuit Aces indicated that a similar trend was happening. So we're like, okay, clearly we got to do Chinese. Japanese was more of a decision. I mean, to some degree, like the style of the game lines up, and it did reasonably well in Battleship Brigade did reasonably well in Japan, but it was also a part of an attempt to line up Switch 2 or just Nintendo support that we thought we had in the bag and didn't work out. And that was because the narrative sort of that we told ourselves for Battleship Brigade, as I mentioned earlier, was like it sold really well on Switch in the first year of the Switch's launch. And so we thought, hey, look, the Switch 2 is coming. We're going to line up just in the same way. We're going to get Nintendo support. And that felt like it almost worked out multiple times, and it didn't. Clearly, Nintendo's Switch 2 strategy was different than the Switch 1, which Switch 1 was very like indie friendly, and they were like very willing to get indies involved. They clearly went for more of like high fidelity Switch 2 market, trying to be more of a non-indie luxury item at the beginning. And
that's a very nice way of saying, why won't they answer my GD emails? Because we are having the same problem ourselves right now.
So like getting Switch 2 dev kits was way harder than it was back in the Switch 1, let's put it that way. And so what we thought, we were pitching at one point for some Nintendo events, and it was clear that adding Japanese would help with those demos and the pitch, and we did it. We love working with Kakahashi. Zach Huntley over there, we worked with them to localize Battleship Brigade as well, and they're amazing and super fast. And there's an element of we worked with two like individual companies, Kakahashi for Japanese and Neon Doctrine for simplified Chinese, and to some degree that was some of the best QA that we were able to get, because getting to each little like narrative beat that might be hard to get to in a game with lots of decision points. We had to give them like the localization guide to get to each of those, and they're reviewing all the text, and so that helped us find some bugs that they're like, hey, I can't get to this part of this one scene, and we need to make sure we have tools so they can get there. That ended up being really good QA, as sort of localization QA ended up being an important part of the overall like narrative QA process.
Yeah, interesting. So, I want to ask about like some of the business, or I don't know, the player end of things. Business and players. That's what Andre and I are talking about all day long, right? With our own stuff. So you have like a fairly complex card game designed. You have a very high-end, like well-produced narrative presentation with all the VO, and obviously amazing art. So as the game is getting out there in the world, like what were you seeing players responding to, or did anything surprise you when it launched?
Yeah, so even rewinding right before launch, like we did a Next Fest demo, and we did a demo before that with Ludo Narracon, which is sort of like the narrative game Steam event. But the whole meta of like marketing meta of do Steam events to get wish lists was very different with Battleship Brigade, where it was like do conventions to get journalists or influencer like streamers to play your game. And so we were like somewhat prepared for that to be important, but that process is just so miserable with creating trailers. It's basically like you need a trailer or an announcement or a demo to get into these events, because there's so many Steam games. They can just pick, each of these events can just pick, like, if you're announcing your game or you've got a demo, you've got a major thing to announce, like, that's all that we can have 100 games that are like that in this event. And those are the things that get wishlist. So we did Ludo and Ericon because we knew it was a very narrative heavy game. And we're like, this is going to be our audience. And that seemed to do really well. We got our biggest wishlist spike was the announcement that was luckily as part of the announcement of Outersloth itself at the Summer Games Fest. We had like 6 seconds in there, but that was 6 seconds of massive wishlist. Ludo and Ericon.
Oh, really? That just that segment of 6 seconds?
It was like 10 or 11,000 wish lists for the announcement.
10 or 11,000 wish lists from
it was.
I think that probably was not just the 6 seconds, but just the fact that it was all in other communications. That Outersloth, they said they're launching games. I can imagine.
I don't know what an announcement elsewhere would have done in hindsight, but that felt like a surprisingly good one. But the endless cycle of trying to be in events, building demos, building trailers was not fun. Anyway, Ludo and Ericon, I don't know how that's going to be sustainable for indie teams to make 5 trailers for every game or whatever. Like, this is not a fun process. But Ludo and Ericon suggested to us that narrative players were really into this, that they're very willing to engage with like a voice, but long story. And that having a card game within it wasn't scary to them, or at least that's the bet that we're making here. Is like we don't want to make like typical genre games. We're trying to mash things up. We're trying to make something unique. Like that's sort of our foundational goal, because it's more fun or more challenging or interesting. At launch, however, the people that Steam was directing to us, or were excited about the game, were more on the roguelite deck builder side. So Ludo and Ericon clearly was funneling like narrative players to us, and launch was more deck builder people. And one of the first patches we made was adding the ability to take cards out of your deck. We had viewed it, we had gone like deck editing, like more aggressive genre aligning deck editing was something we'd added and taken out multiple times. And we're like, characters are our pillar. You're adding characters not just because they are mechanically good for your deck, but also because you want to learn more about them. And we just want to have all your characters in the game. This is like a big ensemble cast that you're building and experiencing together in battles. And it was clear that the narrative players didn't really care too much about what characters are in their deck versus like on their ship and can hang out with. But deck builder players hated being told that this was a game with a deck where you couldn't take cards out. They were like, I kept playing expecting you guys to unlock this, and it just never happened. So that was one of our earliest updates, was like, oh, okay. Like, we strayed too far from the genre. Like, yeah, we dropped...
Sort of one of the
we dropped roguelite.
Supposed to be there was just not there.
Like we took out roguelite, and it's a deck builder and it's a narrative deck builder, but they're like, adding cards to a deck isn't deck buildering enough. You need to be able to remove cards, and I understand that, and that's one of the challenges of trying to build something that's not genre specific. It's unclear which parts of genres are sometimes critical, but that was just not feedback we got at all leading up to that. Like, no Ludo and Ericon player, no Next Fest player was like, this is outrageous. But it showed up in our Steam discussions immediately. And then it was like, okay, like, what form of deck editing is satisfying to these people? What is really important about the genre? How do we make this, like, we don't want to just be like deleting characters. How do we so we ended up like basically benching them. They're still on the ship. They're just not available for the battle. And that seems to have been well received, but it was something I wish we had done earlier.
Yeah. Outersloth. So Did you say? I guess. Did you say they basically operate like as a fund, like less of a publisher, more of funding you so that you can self-publish
Yeah,
it?
so they're basically like, we'll give you money and you make the game. And
Okay.
one of the teams we had pitched, like I mentioned, we pitched like Netflix and Apple Arcade as a mobile game. We pitched as many publishers as we thought would make sense at all, and then we also pitched Kepler, who does like just funding for self-publishing.
Yeah.
And or they have many different labels or whatever, but we were pitching them for self-publishing, and luckily, so that meant we sort of had the self-publishing stuff ready to go, with a fairly compelling pitch, I think, because of our Adult Swim Games experience, where we were like, here are the things we didn't like, and we tried doing them themselves, and we did a great job. Battleship Brigade had a sort of a deluxe launch, where instead of using any of the weird Adult Swim Games trailers, we made our own with an animation house, and that went so much better that I think we had a compelling argument for self-publishing funding, involving like, yeah, we can make better creative decisions than publishers can, so leave us alone.
Well, then Adult Swim can, anyway.
That specific experience was very specific, as you know. And like in retrospect, there were a lot of things that I'm like, oh man, I really wish I had a publisher handling that. But vision for a trailer was not one of those. And we sort of, as indies working with our first publisher, erred sometimes too much on trust the publisher, instead of going with our gut. And so we sort of had that pitch ready to go. We had a self-publishing budget set up, and then when we talked to Outersloth, we had it all ready to go and had that pitch deck in good shape. They were, I mean, not surprisingly, you find the thing in the last place you look, but they were the last publisher or funder that we contacted, and so like everything leading up to that was making our pitch and our demo better, to really wow them, hopefully. And it worked out.
Yeah. And were you able to get the full amount that you were pitching for?
Actually, we got more from them than we were asking for.
Oh, must be hard having as much money as they do, right?
They were a dream to work with. I think they learned a lot from working with us about what they could do better. And I've heard this also from some of the other self-publishing funders, that in this time of less money, they're moving back towards more of a publishing model, or making sure that there are more steps for accountability.
You mean Outersloth specifically?
Not them necessarily.
Or
I think
funders.
that might be something that they have like a very cool like community Slack, like all the developers can work together, and that might be something that they're realizing that they should have a little more hand in. Like Victoria in particular, Victoria Tran is like quite the expert, and like any advice that she gives is super valuable. Whereas like when we signed as one of the earliest games, they were like, do not talk to us. We will not help you. We will do introductions to platforms if you want, but like if you want to talk to like any of our advisors, you need to get permission. And they're like, okay, maybe that was like too harsh. Like they have a lot of resources that are super valuable. But actually, I was thinking of some of the other people we pitched that I've talked to since. They're like, okay, yeah, publishing maybe is a better pure self-publishing is a little dangerous. And sometimes you do need an outside thought or two from someone.
It's a really specific skill that the team is. There's a huge debate, and it's ongoing, and I don't think it's ever going to change, about whether publishing, like some people really into that, working with publishers, others really against it. And I don't think you have to be either really pro or con. It really depends on whether it's two types of really different like businesses. There are some people who like both, but more often than not, people like making games, and then all the rest of that comes on top is just not fun to do. Especially as soon as you learn that it's one thing to publish a game as, okay, that's a game. If it's a successful game, then there's so much stuff that you have to do on top. You want to do on top just to use this opportunity more and build foundations for maybe, I don't know, that's going to be the sequels or just more content for the game and strengthening, because a really successful game can be successful for many years, but that's a lot of operational heavy stuff that is so boring, honestly. If you're doing this as a developer that really wants to focus on like maybe the next game, maybe like more updates and something. So yeah, self-publishing is really a really specific skill that I don't know if many teams working with somebody, and we've entertained this idea back when we started Forklift, whether we'd be open to somebody just going for funding and then just letting them do the publishing thing. We've realized that I don't think we would be comfortable doing this with somebody that we haven't seen successfully publish something, because just for the majority of people, just this iceberg, they see publishing as this one little thing, which is a lot of work, but then everything that's over there below is just really unexpected.
Yeah, we definitely wouldn't have even considered it without having already worked with Adult Swim games and seeing what things they could handle that maybe we could handle, and what things. So another aspect of that is we were able to work with multiple people from Adult Swim games to sort of like handle some of these things, including Jackie Collins, who was an amazing marketing PR partner and like ally in managing Adult Swim games, and so we were able to, Battlesuit Aces, Jackie was able to sort of consult and help with a whole bunch of different beats for PR. And so there were times where we're like, okay, we have experience going through this process, we know what things we are terrible at, and we know some people who can help us handle this. And if we hadn't had that experience, there's no way we would have been able to self-publish. But there's like having gone through one game with a publisher is like nowhere near enough experience to handle all the publishing tasks. There's so many things that you need to have at least the indie community to interact with and be like, okay, like, did I press all the right buttons on the PlayStation 5 backend? And the answer is never yes. It's always like, which ones did I miss? Does that one matter too much? So like, there are so many times when you're like, if a publisher has done this 10 or 30 times, they are going to get it right in so much less time. They're going to do the right thing. They have the experience. They have the connections. We had some of the connections, like Outersloth was able to introduce us to each of the platforms, and like, I know they will give us a response, because if the Among Us person emails you, you have to email back. And I remember at Adult Swim Games, like being like, oh yeah, we have a weekly call with Nintendo. Like those things, like you just can't get that by filling out some form on Nintendo's site.
Honestly though, when we had that with Nintendo back at Tiny Build, I hope I can share that. Honestly, that wasn't... I would expect it being more valuable. It was great to have that. It was cool for learning stuff, but then it was not... I would expect it to be a bit more helpful for making the games achieve more success, but it was less that. So, and in some cases I would not speak specifically on Nintendo, but in some cases have those calls that just suck out a lot of your time, and then you get nothing, because they just need those calls for KPIs, and you need those calls for nothing, and you realize that too late, and just...
I think all of the platforms are like that. Like you have some connection to a BD person, they love to chat, and they'll chat anytime you want until you ask for something. And then it's like, whoa, you know, we don't just give out money over here. Like, you know, you got to go through this weird backend system and make a request or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and, but we cannot talk too much shit about consoles because we're just launching our first console game.
We're all playing in the same field here. You know?
They're extremely important, and it's just painful to not be able to guarantee anything. So yeah, like there are plenty of times when self-publishing is just, you know, it's taking longer for you to do something because you haven't done it like many times a year. You do it like we're not like in the meta of marketing or like what the platform holders want when they're like, we want some specific integration today. We like dip our toes into that, or we dive into it like every 4 years, whereas a publisher is doing that many times a year. And that's such a different experience and like level of expertise and understanding. Like we launched the games. There's no way we're going to like do it again right the next time we have to log into those backends. Like Steam is like very reasonable, but it's still got like, okay, where was that button that I need to hit to make the demo page show up? And we're going to forget that until the next time we make a demo. And
I mean, we forget that stuff sometimes too. That's how many different things there are, even though we do it multiple times a year. I think, honestly, as it's true for dealing with things like backends, but maybe even more significantly, like the whole strategic landscape of the game industry turns over every 3 years these days. So, like, if you're only making a game every 3 years, then I mean, you can look at it with Battleship Brigade and Battlesuit Aces. Like, the difference between conventions versus digital festivals with those two, it's like that, every 3 years. Something is going to change. There's going to be a major shift in the way games are marketed and promoted, in the way discoverability works. And some people who are just really dialed in are following along with that. And might, they're ready for it. But if you're just really focused on creative, like on making your thing and not paying attention to the way like marketing works, then a couple years go by and everything is different from the last time you did this. And, like now you need 8 trailers to get an indie game launched that you didn't need to do a couple years ago, And I think that's where we help sometimes, at least because we're on top of this in an ongoing way, trying to follow those trends.
So actually, I wanted to ask you, Tom, about this. How happy were you with your like self-published marketing effort? Overall, it seems like you had a good chunk of initial wish lists coming from that announcement, and then it was the Steam event that was just before Steam Next Fest. Is there something that you wish done differently specifically on the marketing side of things, or?
I think like I mentioned earlier,
what's your reference point?
Two pain points where I don't feel like we ever really nailed the elevator pitch, the one-liner for Battlesuit Aces. It changed so many times, and it never felt like on the tip of my tongue the way Battleship Brigades was. So that was like sort of the core concept. It was like the most important part of marketing, and there was room for improvement. We also, an important thing for Battleship Brigade was making it like an animated trailer. And we had budgeted for it, but then that budget ended up needing to be pulled to narrative team and dialogue, like voice recording, and like making multiple trailers. We had budgeted like we'll need like 2 trailers or maybe 3, but then it was like, okay, you actually need like 5 maybe. And so that sort of that was one of the areas where it's easy to cut into the trailer budget if you've really made it big, and then you just spread it out more. And so some of our trailers were never like as good as we wanted. And then the other fundamental thing is like for consoles, platform featuring is the most important thing. And we weren't able to secure the ones that we thought we had gotten close to or something. And that's sort of like you just got to have the right relationships. Your game has to be up against the right competitors for their portfolio for a video, like a Nintendo Indie World showcase, that kind of thing, where it's your game, it's your pitch deck, it's like how you've been in the zeitgeist so far since your release, how journalists are responding to it, if those that still exist. So I think it was sort of, there are a lot of things involved in marketing. We really liked working with Dana Trabella of Spoke and Wheel Strategy. She's amazing. But at some point, there's like such a difference between like at some point, the most important part of marketing is making those right decisions early on about what the game is. And that's where publishers can be incredibly helpful, or getting outside of whatever bubble you're in. Like we're in the Chicago indie community, and whether or not the teams there can give you the feedback about your ideas because they like the genres or whatever, that can be really hard. Like getting that early pitch iteration is probably the key thing, where like a publisher, either a publisher will just say no, like, I don't think this is a good fit for us, or they might be like, are you willing to discuss this and tweak it? Is it more like this kind of genre or more like this kind of genre? And like, we have expertise in this, and we have examples that we've worked on that have lessons that are clearly applicable here. I think it would have been good if we'd had more of those. Like we certainly felt like we could make those good decisions ourselves, but we didn't make all of them right. You know, there are just so many decisions where sometimes you need a little outside input from someone more experienced with that specific issue. And that's always, I mean, creative stuff, it's super hard. I think like at some point, like you go all in on something that you believe in, and it either works or it doesn't. Or like all of our games, it's not a hit and it's not a flop, and that's really annoying too.
Yeah.
I definitely see what you mean. As a publisher, we often look not just for, there's a bunch of things we look at, but one of them is seeing if we feel like there's connection, like chemistry with the developer, where if we bring some information about how we see the players react to the game or how they play, and we sort of want to give an idea or like just maybe suggest a something on the game itself, we want to be heard and then ensure the developer actually considers and then makes a decision what's best for the game, and feel like this is a collaboration between us and them, without us at any given time being put in the driver's seat. God forbid, that's not what we want to do. But yeah, what you said before, that some of the most important things is how do you shape the game initially and how you present it in a way that's ideally going to have organic traction, more of that, rather than if something that's extremely cool when you play it, but somehow from the way it's presents itself, it's not getting that initial interest from the players. It's going to be such an uphill battle, almost impossible, I think, nowadays to make it into something. Yeah.
The other thing that comes to mind, where sort of post-launch stuff that Adult Swim games, I think, at least from our perception, did a great job of, was like sort of secondary markets. There are always, or not always, but in boom times in industry, there's money flowing around for getting games onto other platforms that don't exist or are about to exist. Battleship Brigade was able to, or through Adult Swim Games, was able to get money from like the brief Discord store, the brief Twitch store that existed, and Xbox Game Pass for PC. And that was all basically like, hey, we have a DRM free build. Please go find places that will give us money for it. And that was all like post-launch and super effective. I think that ended up being about a third of the revenue for Battleship Brigade, was sort of just like publisher knows about stuff. And
making extra money from the same thing. It's really what one of the public
and that was an area where we had no idea. We wouldn't have had any of those connections. And most indies who are even like super transparent indies aren't as willing to share that widely. Like, hey, I just got a whole bunch of money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars from some platform that you've never heard of, but is about to exist. They're not going to share that, like that golden goose they just found, too widely. They're going to share it with maybe their friends. But they don't want to ruin that relationship by being like, oh yeah, email this person. Those individual connections are so valuable. So that's an area where like, the publisher knows. And I think in particular, like Xbox Game Pass for PC was launching, and they were like, we want a lot of games. If they work with 100 individual developers to get games, it's going to take forever, and they're going to be negotiating forever. But Adult Swim Games could just say like, hey, we've got a portfolio of 20 games. Do you want to add them? That was like an easy press release for Microsoft. and just like brought over 20 games, and now it looks like there are more games on there, and we can do 2 games now. And like we can bundle 2 games, but a publisher can bundle up a whole portfolio and bundle it on Steam and bring it to other platforms, and that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
So to whatever degree you're comfortable, I'd love to hear from you about the performance across the different platforms that Battlesuit Aces launched on, and what the kind of takeaways were.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, like we sort of hoped that Switch would, or Switch 2 in particular, we weren't able to get Switch 2 dev kits in time. We had really hoped that Switch would do well. But at the same time, when we didn't get Nintendo featuring or like get into some Nintendo events, we're like, okay, clearly we are going to switch how we present this game. We're going to focus more on like, it's a card game, it's a narrative game. Those are still popular on Steam. Card games in particular, like, are probably better with a mouse anyway. And there's a clear like roguelite deck builder genre that's still flowing along after all these years since Slay the Spire. So we didn't view that as like terrible, but to focus on Steam more. But Steam is our best platform, and then PS5 and Switch are about the same at about a quarter of that. Whereas Battleship Brigade, Switch was double Steam. The other thing with Battleship Brigade, though, was that we released on PS4 after launch, like with our deluxe launch that added a whole bunch of new systems, and local multiplayer being the big one. And that did nothing. It was not worth the cost of porting at all. So there's some degree, we don't have very many data points, but consoles can be fickle, like their storefronts are totally, like discoverability is a totally different problem there. So Battlesuit Aces, like definitely Steam is the big one. We are in the weird zone where we didn't fail to get any reviews or something like that. It's not the like hit trajectory. So we're working on a lot of things to sort of like deck editing, align with some of the genres better, release small updates and a big update to see if we can rekindle some of that, try again with streamers with a new mode. Trying to basically use all the stuff we built to see if we can rekindle that flame, restart the virality or something. And Steam has, like, as you know, like the some mechanisms for like if there's a major update, you can use a visibility round, stuff like that we're intrigued to see if we edit the page, if we modify trailers, if we make more like the critical reception trailers. We're like, hey, yeah, game is reviewing really well. Try to give it another shot. I think that it's like really hard to just walk away from something. And it may be, sunk costs, but we're still going to give it a shot because I think we sort of owe it to our players and the team. And as long as we can afford it, it's worth doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think you guys are at 87% positive, which like, once you have a couple hundred reviews, it's pretty accurate at that point. So like,
Yeah, there's
obviously it could always be higher, but that's like a really strong score, I think, especially for a game that crosses genres.
So that suggests that we might have more of a marketing problem, like we're not presenting this game well enough, or our price is too high. Battleship Brigade was $20, and I was like, we're not it's 100 years later. It's like almost 10 years later. Like we got to go to 25. Economically, these times are very different from 2017, and in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, maybe we should start at 20. But we'll see as our discounts go lower, how that changes. Like if we can convert a lot more wish lists, like be better and better. And there's a thing that we talk about as a team a lot. There's like, okay, is it worth fixing this thing that like all the current players have already seen? And the answer is yes. like the vast majority of all the players who will play Battlesuit Aces have not played it yet, because the game will go further and further on discount. We'll try to be in like a humble bundle or whatever promo like free game things exist. Go to other platforms, but even just on Steam, like the long tail can be enormous and outweigh launch by a lot. And so there's a lot of things you're like, is this worth fixing for the current players? No. Will they care about the update thing? They'll be like, well, I already finished that part, or like, it's cool that you polished that, but I'm not playing the single player campaign the third time. But for those new players,
right.
like they will only know that beautiful experience. There are a couple of streamers playing right now, and like they're just seeing the better version that we've improved. Like I think we have like 3 or 4 patches since launch. They're playing that version. They never knew that the map was uglier or like this one illustration wasn't polished. They just see the better version. So that's a really important thing that we remind ourselves of a lot. We're even joking that like there's one like pretty popular streamer playing through the whole thing, and we're like, okay, maybe we should look at what decisions they've made in the game and polish just those things as fast as possible. So next time they open it, their cards are fancier or like the map looks better for their specific choices.
That's funny. Well, for what it's worth, I think the price is actually exactly right. I often am convincing people to price things higher than they might want to. We always say that the price should be like one pricing tier up from your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Basically, because of the discount model.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. I went by that logic, and I still believe it. But when your game doesn't go viral, you just want to revisit every single decision you ever made and change all of them. So
of course,
that was one of them.
Yep.
Similar to releasing a game in October. Battle Chef Brigade launched in November during Thanksgiving week, which we thought was, for a cooking game, kind of cute. And no Nintendo games were releasing on Switch 1 that year, or like that week, because like Mario Odyssey was near it. I forget before or after, and there was some other game before or after. We're like, well, like no one's releasing on Thanksgiving. We're making a cook game. I don't know how much that actually mattered one way or another. And then the same thing, we're like, okay, November was like too close to the end of the year in the danger zone. Let's be earlier. We had wanted to be way earlier, but we couldn't push to January or February financially, or without a lot of pain. So we tried to get it up to October 7th. And it's hard to know with launch dates how much they matter. But also like there is a limited number of games on Steam that hit the like virality, like review count each week. And it's really hard to know who you're going to be up against until it happens. I don't know how much that matters, but it feels like it might have mattered, like all the decisions.
Well, the thing is that it matters alongside 50 other factors, and that's where it is getting into a ridiculous amount of math that you cannot make on your own anymore. Yeah, I love the game. I love Slay the Spire, and some of the other deck builders. I'm not that much into anime stuff, outside of maybe Attack on Titan and maybe a couple of others. I don't know if one of the characters, Jaeger, well, I mean, all of that is references to many things. I love the actual card mechanics. I was actually surprised by how I'm going to be hooked. So I think I'm like a few hours into the game, like 3 or 4, and I'm definitely going to continue and see.
That's really kind. And that reminds me of a whole phase of that prototyping stuff that you earlier asked about. That like we paper prototyped a lot for the final energy collection system. Once we're like, okay, the cards are characters. We did a lot of paper prototyping up until the point where we made this big realization that, wait, we're not making a multiplayer game. And paper prototyping this mechanics with actual like player versus player, like sitting down at a table, and even if someone's like emulating the like enemy, it's not the same. Like you don't want it to design it to necessarily be symmetrical or balanced. You want to be designing for like a fun roller coaster in every battle. And so there was a point where paper prototyping the energy system worked out really well. And then there's a point where like you can't keep designing abilities in that context because you start designing things that's more like playing against someone, like Hearthstone or Magic, and that will lead you astray very quickly.
That's a really good insight. I'm actually like super impressed that your team does not have a dedicated designer, because of how tight the card mechanics feel. Andre and I have talked about this because in our roles as publishers, we have probably looked at 100 plus card battler pitches over the last 2 years. It's become a very popular genre. And one of the challenges is that even when they have playables and you can test them, it's really hard to know if this prototype will scale to a full-size game and remain fun and interesting. And a lot of that comes down to the quality of the design and the skill of the designer. And it's difficult to assess that in a team that you haven't met before. So for us, it's like a challenge. You guys, I think, did a really good job on it without even having a dedicated designer. So
unfortunately, looking at Battleship Brigade and looking at Battlesuit Aces, the way we get around that problem of not having like a dedicated designer or like clear design training is spending a lot of time iterating in pre-production. Battleship Brigade, the cooking system basically took us a year to figure out. And on the one hand, it's like a fun challenge, but it's also incredibly demoralizing every time you think you figured something out and then you realize that it's flawed in some critical way and you try something else. And that's why we went through so many prototypes. And there were a whole bunch of times where like there were times when we would the Chicago communities, there's this thing called demo day, and we would bring our game multiple times. And there were times, actually even before that, I think we just showed it to some of the other indie developers, and you watch them play just like at a convention, super valuable, watching them play, not saying anything. And then you get their thoughts and you're like, well, it's time to throw all this away. Or not all of it, but change the core system. And there was a time when each card had two built-in active abilities, and you could see way less of the art, and the abilities were way more complicated. And we just realized like all these abilities need to be thrown out, and we need to build more like smaller modular abilities that can synergize better or create interesting combos. And that's like so demoralizing to build a demo and then be like, all of our cards are bad and this isn't working. But I think that's how we get around the problem, is just spend a lot of time doing it, which in retrospect, it's like a really fun time, but it's also so painful when you feel like it's not working and you don't know what to do. But that's sort of what games all about. Being demoralized and figuring it out.
So looking to the future, you said you're continuing to support the game. You've got plans there, some of which it sounds like you're not ready to share yet. Totally fine. But like where, what are you guys thinking about a future game yet? Have you started playing around with anything? Where do you see the studio going?
We're still very much focused on Battlesuit Aces, but as we sort of hinted at, we miss those days of having a smaller team and making a game faster. Like it still sort of blows our minds that we made Color Sheep in 2 months, and it was very much like an arcade game. But there's a level of collaboration that's possible with those smaller games where we can just like gather around one problem and jam on it and solve it, that we all really miss. Well, like once your team gets over 20 people, it's really hard to do that. It's like everyone's just got their own thing and you just got to make decisions really fast, and you're never sitting down and like tweaking something like the like logo title screen. You just run out of time for things. And I think this is probably the case for like all developers. You ship a game and you're like, I wish I was making something smaller where I got to spend more time polishing, because I just wish I had been polishing this thing before release. So we'll see where we land. Like Battlesuit Aces is supposed to be a smaller game than it was by far. So we'll see if we can pull that off. It's really hard once you get a good idea not to let it grow. But
Yeah.
it feels exciting and fun for that period.
That's awesome. Well, Andre, anything else from you before we wrap it up?
No, I think I asked all the questions that I had. Yeah, really looking forward to see what are you going to do with both Battlesuit Aces, and the future games. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for being our first guest, Tom. And I hope you have an exciting few months ahead of you continuing to improve it. And for anybody who's watching this one day in the future, please go check out Battlesuit Aces. It's a lot of fun. We had a great time learning more about it and chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Tucker and Andre. It was great.